Joe Biden has reportedly decided to waive sanctions on a Russian pipeline into Germany.
Team Rising is here to weigh in. We're joined by Maximilian Alvarez. He is editor-in-chief of The Real News and host of the Working People podcast, and also Henry Rogers. He is congressional correspondent for The Daily Caller. And Henry, what's notable to us about this is, during the Trump presidency, anytime there was anything to do with Russia, if he was soft on Russia, that got a whole lot of attention. If he did things that actually were kind of tough on Russia, that was completely buried. Here you have Biden doing something that Vladimir Putin really wants, and very little being said about any of this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is peak hypocrisy. I remember when Nancy Pelosi would get on stage every week, basically, that Trump would do something related to Russia and say, I wonder what his ties are to Russia. His family has to have some serious ties here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. She would go on like that for months. And then we did an impeachment, which failed to find any collusion there. I just think that this is insane. I mean, if this was any other person, if this was Donald Trump, just imagine the headlines we'd be seeing right now. This was a huge win for Putin. Putin's been fighting for this pipeline for forever. Biden does not want to go secede to Germany or, lose any alliance there. So he's giving this huge win to Russia, which I think many people would say and agree with me. The fact that if it was anybody else, including Donald J. Trump, the headlines would be steered insanely.
Right. And Max, there's a conversation to be had about whether America should be even sanctioning it in the first place, around Russia policy, et cetera. I think that was actually a very worthy conversation that was started in 2015. But the fact that you can do this, and I mean, despite talking such a big game for the last 6 years and face nothing from your own internal caucus, as well as like the foreign policy establishment and in the press, I think is pretty ridiculous.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I'm glad that we kind of started this way because it helped answer what was going to be kind of my question back to the panel, right? Because again, being transparent, right? In years, the past, years of talking to workers around the country, I'll be honest, Democratic or Republican, the topic that seems to have come up the least in my conversations with working people is Russia, right? And so I want to be sure that for whoever's watching, whoever's invested in this, that I'm responding to and trying to share thoughts on things that they're interested in. And so my question was really going to be, is the main kind of issue here that this is, as the press is describing it, like a quote unquote win for Putin, and the concern is the kind of geopolitical ramifications of that? Or is it more just the media and Democrats were beating Trump over the head about being a doll for Putin for 5 years, and now when Biden has a chance to kind of be tough, put on the big boy pants or whatever, he doesn't do it. That seems to me to be the main kind of source of frustration for people. Am I right?
Yeah, I think so. Because again, and this is what Glenn is pointing out. Glenn was like, look, I'm not even for sanctions on Nord Stream 2. He's like, this actually is a genuinely large gift to Putin. Right. And all of the panels that you would have seen in MSNBC, as well as in elite media and more, around whether Trump had come even close to this, almost certainly would have pushed a major backlash. I guarantee you there would have been some protests out of Poland or something. There would have been an international NATO problem. Nothing from that on this, on the very same policy, again, that we're talking about here.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it stinks, right? Because it shows, I think, right? I'll try to kind of offer, again, some thoughts. It shows, I think, in a lot of ways, right, this sort of kind of bipartisan ability to detract from the things that really have the most outsized influence on the rest of our lives, right? I think that if this was less of, a sort of partisan thing where Democrats were trying to pin Trump to the wall via Russia, and now they're kind of backtracking, and of course, Republicans are going to feel pissed about that, so they're going to point the finger back at it, We've been through these kind of back and forths every 4 years for my entire lifetime. But I think one thing that is really telling, right, is that the Secretary of State in one of these Axios reports that I was reading said that ultimately what the Biden administration chose to do was not to put sanction on Russia. They got a weird, pointless kind of gesture that they're going to try to sanction some ships who are involved in the building of this pipeline, or maybe kind of threat to some of the private companies, which is a perfect, it's an internationally means tested kind of solution to a nonsense to a problem, right?
Well said.
But I think that like the thing that was really telling was what the Biden administration said was that we opted to strengthen our allyships with Germany and Western Europe so that we can establish the order in the world that reflects our needs and our priorities. So what are those needs and priorities, right? What are the things that Germany and the United States are currently collaborating on? What are the things that the U.S. is really kind of leading in the kind of world sphere? Well, it's participating in and supporting like a blockade that is killing millions of Yemenis. It's supporting like a military-industrial international complex that is currently raining hellfire down on Palestine or Venezuela. I mean, like, there is a lot of other stuff that is screwing us over and that is being funded by our tax dollars that unfortunately I think Republicans and Democrats or left and right working people can be in alignment on, but unfortunately the media keeps pitting us against one another by trying to pin this as some sort of kind of like Russiagate like thing. That's my read on it.
That's really well said.
Yeah, I think that's all very well said. And Henry, I mean, why I think this is significant is it's just a little bit of a window into the way that narrative setting happens, right? The way you look at the things that confirm your evidence, that your priors, you lift those things up, you use them to craft this narrative of like Trump is giving Putin everything that he wants, and you ignore the things that don't support your conclusion. So the tendency under Trump was to emphasize anything that Trump was doing that was a gift to Putin. And under Biden, the tendency is to emphasize anything that he's doing that's tough on Putin. And both create a really skewed perception of what is actually happening.
100%. And I just think it is, though, and I think it's the press's duty to be holding these people accountable and be asking these questions. I just don't think it's fair that we have, the press, hammering one president over this and not the other. I think that needs to be treated better moving forward. I think that it needs to be handled better moving forward. The press on Capitol Hill is so far to the left that it's just outrageous. And I think that, we obviously are trying to fill that void in my job, but we need real tough questions up there. And the fact that no leaders are asking about this is quite interesting, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think if you had a press that was actually left and consistent in values, you would get a lot better result than what you do with the sort of like liberal tribalism that dominates elite media spaces. Guys, great to see you both. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Coming up, friend of the show, co-host of the Bad Faith Podcast, Brianna Joy Gray. She's with us when Rising continues.